this is Warhawk Beyond 2040, and welcome to a very special edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series. And today I am going to be taking a look at the amazing and impressive catalogue from one of the greatest and most important bands to ever burst onto the scene in the progressive rock genre in the last 30 plus years. And for my money, they are one of the finest bands to ever come out of Britain, and they are one of my all-time favorites. And this is a band that, quite frankly, needs no introduction whatsoever. I am talking about, of course, the one and only legendary progressive rock band, Porcupine Tree. And this is part two of a three-part special where I will be discussing Porcupine Tree's entire catalogue of albums. So, for part one, I discussed all of Porcupine Tree's studio albums, and for today's special edition, which is part two, I will be discussing Porcupine Tree's EPs and their compilations as well. So, some of Porcupine Tree's EPs and compilations feature material that was either left over from an album, some of the material were not used for other albums, some material was recorded and never released. So there's a bit of everything here. And some of the EPs were released as part of some of Porcupine Tree's studio albums as double albums. And what I'll be doing for today's edition, as I mentioned already, I'll be discussing Porcupine Tree's EPs and their compilations. And for my money, there's some really good material. There's some really good music. And around the time I was becoming more familiar with Porcupine Tree's music, I did say before in part one, initially I wasn't really a fan of Porcupine Tree. Some of their earlier stuff didn't really appeal to me. But I really enjoyed some of the EPs and some of the compilations. I don't know what it is, but there was some really good music on some of their compilation and EPs that I enjoyed more than some of their early studio albums, which is quite bizarre, really, because usually with compilations, it's what you would call a best of, hence the name compilations. It's usually like featuring, the best tracks or their greatest hits, things like that. But what Porcupine Tree did was, it wasn't just necessarily a best of. In itself, it was kind of like its own studio album. And that's what really appealed to me when I was slowly starting to warm up to Porcupine Tree's music. So, what I'm going to do is, as always, I am going to be talking about each album individually. And as always, I'll be choosing which one I think is the best one. There's some really good stuff here. Any of these EPs or compilations could easily be a favourite. And as I said, there's some really good music, some really good material. Some of it I'm a little bit surprised about why Stephen Wilson never just put it on Porcupine Tree's albums just to make it complete, but I'm sure Stephen Wilson's got his reasons. And a lot of the material on these EPs and albums were all featured on different labels throughout Porcupine Tree's career as a band. So that could be part of the reason why maybe some of that material wasn't released. So we're going to start with the first album, which is a compilation. And this one was released in 1998. And this one is called Metonia. So Metonia is a collection of studio improvisations featuring the original incarnation of Porcupine Tree, comprised of Stephen Wilson, Richard Barbieri, Colin Edwin, and Chris Maitland. And it's pretty much like a jam collection. There's some really good playing, and it's just more or less Porcupine Tree in jam mode. So this wasn't necessarily for an official album in the traditional sense. It was just the guys having a jam and just seeing where things go. And some of the jamming is really good. And, Stephen Wilson, a lot of people forget because he's always had top guitarists in his bands in recent years. Stephen Wilson is a really good guitar player, and I think a lot of people seem to forget that because he's more known as an all-round multi-instrumentalist slash band leader and producer. But people forget that he's a really good damn guitar player. So for the first half of Metonia, we see Porcupine Tree performing as a four-piece. And then on the second half of Metonia, we see Porcupine Tree performing as a trio. So that's quite an interesting um, approach for Porcupine Tree. I've never really heard them play as a three piece before. Traditionally, I've always known them as a four piece, and there's some really good, strong material. So we've got Mesmer parts one and two, and we got Mesmer part three slash Coma Divine, and we've got Door to the River, Metonia 1 slash Intermediate Jesus, Insignificance, Metonia Part 2, and Milan. So some really good, strong material here. And as I said, it's just more or less like Porcupine Tree in jam mode, and these are mostly like improvisations, which were recorded between 1995 to 1996. And there's some really good playing. It's kind of like this rawness to Porcupine Tree. It's not really Porcupine Tree in studio mode. It's a lot more looser, and it's very enjoyable. There's some really enjoyable playing, and it's nice to hear that side of a band just letting loose and just seeing where the playing and the music goes. And my favourite standout tracks for Metonia are Mesmer Part 1, Mesmer Part 2, and Mesmer Part 3 slash Coma Divine, Metonia Part 1 slash Intermediate Jesus, and Metonia Part 2. But really good, enjoyable compilation. And as I said, some of these compilations, they're not really what you call your traditional compilations. They're kind of like full original albums in their own rights, but very enjoyable nonetheless. So there you have it, Metonia. Great stuff. And if you're looking to hear a different side to Porcupine Tree's music, I think this is a great place to start. As I said, you get to hear different sides to Porcupine Tree's playing. And a lot of the material here is not really like set material, it's just more like improvisations. But it's cool to see that side for a prog band. The only other band I know of who've done like improvisation is, of course, King Crimson. So, it's nice to see that bands can still stretch their stuff and go different places. So there you have it, Metonia. Very enjoyable, and one that I would highly recommend if you're looking to check out a different side to Porcupine Tree's playing. This is definitely one worth checking out for sure. So there you have it, Metonia. Really enjoyed this one a lot. Great stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2000, and this one is one of my favorites as far as the EPs are concerned from Porcupine Tree, and this one is called Voyage 34. So Voyage 34 is still very much in the ambient, spacey, psychedelic sort of style that Porcupine Tree were more known for before shifting towards the metal side of things. But I've always enjoyed this one a lot. I think the material is really good. I think the playing is great. Stephen Wilson is producing, composing, and playing all of the music himself, much like on his earlier albums. And Richard Barbieri is featured on one track, but it's a really good EP. There are four tracks that make up the entire Voyage 34 piece, and I really like this one a lot. I think this one is very enjoyable, a little bit out there, a little bit strange. I did say before that some of the earlier stuff of Porcupine Tree I wasn't really a fan of, but for some reason, Voyage 34 really grabbed my attention. I really thought this was very strong. It is a bit on that sort of side of things, a little bit out there, but I just really enjoyed this one a lot. I just think this one really spoke to me a lot, and it's one of those EPs or even albums, depending on what you call it. You really got to have a certain mind for You know, you don't just say, "Oh, I'm going to listen to Voyage 34 today." You've got to be in that certain kind of mood. But I really, really like this one a lot. So there are four tracks that make up the title track. So part one is 12 minutes, part two is 17 minutes, part three is 19 minutes, and part four is 13 minutes. So they're all quite long pieces that make up the entire piece itself, but really enjoyable. Really like this one a lot. I don't reach for this one very often, but when I do, it really takes me to different places. It's very atmospheric. It's very lush. I think the production is very good, you know, considering it was recorded back in 1983. And obviously, Stephen Wilson wouldn't be quite the producer we will come to know him to be now, but I think the production on here is quite good. I think this holds up very well. You know, 30 plus years later, it's still really good music. It's very enjoyable to listen to. And the standout tracks for me is part three and part one, but all of it is very good. And it's one of those albums you've really got to listen to, you know, in its entirety to really get the full experience, you know, of what this is all about. Hence the name Voyage. It's kind of like a trip. You know, it's a very trippy journey, you know, so to speak. You know, you can see by the cover, it's quite a trippy trip, but really like this one a lot. Highly recommended. Think I would say, as far as EPs are concerned, I would definitely rank this as one of Porcupine Tree's best. I think this was really good. It's one of my favourites as well. So there you have it. Voyage 34. Excellent EP. One of my favourites from the Porcupine Tree EP set. Love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2001, and it's another compilation. And this is one that I really enjoyed listening to a lot when I was putting this together. And it's got some really good, strong, unreleased material from Porcupine Tree. And of course, obviously, there is some material from Porcupine Tree from some of their previous albums. And this one is called Recordings. Very good, strong compilation that Porcupine Tree has put together. This is one that I would definitely highly recommend if you want to check out some of Porcupine Tree's earlier works. And there's some really good material, especially unreleased stuff. There's some really good, strong stuff here. So, what we've got here is we've got a lot of material that was from Lightbulb Sun. There's also some material from Stupid Dream, and there's also some material that wasn't previously released. And there's also one track that was more like a single, which was recorded during the Lightbulb Sun sessions. And I like it. As I said, this is a really good compilation, and there's some really good stuff on here. And I definitely would recommend this a lot if people want to get into more at the middle period to the early 2000s period. There's some really good stuff here. So, unreleased material you got here is Access Denied. You've got Even Less and Oceans Have No Memory. And of course, you got the single Disappear, which was originally appeared on a single called Four Chords That Made a Million, which was recorded during the Lightbulb Sun sessions. But as I said, there's some really good, strong material. I really enjoyed this one a lot. And the standout tracks for me, of course, are the unreleased tracks like Buying New Soul and Even Less and Access Denied and Oceans Have No Memory. You know, I'm quite surprised that, you know, Stephen Wilson didn't just put them out as a separate EP. Maybe could have called it the Lightbulb Sun sessions or something like that. But there's some really good stuff here. I think it's a very well put together compilation in terms of the choice of material. And maybe this could have been a double. You know, maybe could have had disc one, all the well known tracks, and then disc two could have been, you know, the unreleased material, or maybe released them separate. Who knows? But this is definitely worth checking out, in my opinion. I really enjoyed this one a lot. As I said, some of Porcupine Tree's stuff that I liked before I got into them main stuff in the early 2000s was more or less from the EPs and compilations. It was just something about the music that was chosen that really appealed to me a lot, and this was definitely one of them. So there you have it, recordings, great compilation, bit of a mixture of well-known material and previously unreleased material. So great stuff here, love it. So we move on to the next album, and this one came out in 2002, and it's a double disc compilation box set, and this one is called Stars Die the Derillium Years, 1991 to 1997. So, just like in the name, this is a compilation box set with two discs compiling all of the material from all of Porcupine Tree's albums when they were on the Derillium label. And it's mostly featured material from their previous albums, and there's a few unreleased tracks and some new mixes which are exclusive to this compilation. And like I said at the beginning, some of Porcupine Tree's most enjoyable music were from the compilations, and I really like a lot of the unreleased material. I think there's some really good music there. So, we've got on disc one, we've got two previously unreleased tracks, and we've got two new mixes. And also on disc two, we've got one previous unreleased track and another one as well. And we've also got two singles EP versions, so and a new mix as well, also exclusive to this box set. But it's very good, it's very well put together. And as I said before, the early Porcupine Tree stuff I weren't that keen on, but some of the tracks they had on those early albums really stood out to me, and a lot of them are on here. So I think, if you just want to like hear their best tracks from those earlier stuff, then maybe buying a compilation is the way to go because there's some really good music here. So the standout tracks for me on disc one is Synthesizer Extended Version, which was previously unreleased, and Phantoms, and Up, Downstair, and Fade Away, which was new mixes. They really stood out to me. I thought they really sounded good. And the standout tracks for me on disc two is Men of Wood and Signify 2, which were previously unreleased. Really good stuff there. And The Sound of No One Listening, which is a new mix exclusive to this box set. Really enjoyed that one a lot. And Fuse the Sky, which is more like an EP version. I really enjoyed that one a lot. And if you want to hear some of what Porcupine Tree's early stuff were like during their Derillium Years run, this is definitely one to check out. Hence the name, the Derillium Years, and the cover's quite cool as well. So there you have it. Stars Die, the Derillium Years, 1991 to 1997. Very well put together compilation. Some excellent choices. The previously unreleased tracks are probably among the best of this entire collection, but really like this one a lot. Some great playing, some great musicianship, and some really good, strong material on here, in my opinion. So there you have it. Stars Die, the Derillium Years, 1991 to 1997. Excellent stuff. So we move on to the next album, and this one is an EP that came out in 2007, and it's my all-time favourite, and it's definitely up there with Voyage 34, although it's completely different. And this is more or less Porcupine Tree at the top of their game, and this one is called Neil Recurring. What more can you say? Neil Recurring, a badass EP which featured material that was written and recorded during the Fear of a Blank Planet sessions, and this is Porcupine Tree at their heaviest and most proggiest, and it's got the classic lineup of Stephen Wilson, Richard Barbieri, Colin Edwin, and Gavin Harrison, and we got a guest appearance from Robert Fripp on lead guitar from King Crimson, and we got Ben Coleman on electric violin. Kick-ass music, prog metal on steroids at its heaviest, you name it, it's all here. Absolutely love this, and to me, this was more or less like a sequel to Fear of a Blank Planet, and maybe the material should have been added to that album, or at least made it a double album or something like that. But you know, but still, excellent music, start to finish. Every song, although there's only 4 tracks, just absolutely rock. So we got the title track, New Recurring, which is like a badass instrumental. We got Normal, which is great. One of Porcupine Tree's most memorable songs, Cheating the Polygraph. Now, many years after, Gavin Harrison put out a big band album of Porcupine Tree material, but played more like brassy versions, and it was called Cheating the Polygraph. So you can kind of look at that as a sequel as well. Tremendous track. And What Happens Now, which is like the longest track, 8 minutes. Great album, 4 amazing tracks from top to bottom. Definitely up there with Voyage 34. Absolutely love this one. And standout tracks for me are Nil Recurring and Cheating the Polygraph, but you can't go wrong. Every track on here, although there's only 4, is excellent. A true EP, very enjoyable, and everyone is just ripping it up. And having Robert Fripp with Porcupine Tree, King Crimson meets Porcupine Tree. What a monster collaboration. Doesn't get any better than that. So there you have it. Neil Recurring, excellent EP, and probably my all time favourite out of this whole set here. Excellent stuff. Love it. So, which Porcupine Tree EP and compilation do I think is the best one? Well, they're all good, they're all different, and some of the compilations have some excellent music. Some of the previously unreleased material really stood out to me. And as I said, if you're looking to get into Porcupine Tree's music, then I probably would start with the compilations first and then just work your way from there because there's some really good music, as I said. But if I had to choose which one out of this set I think is the best one, I'm easily going with Neil Recurring. I love Voyage 34 in a different way, but if you're just looking to listen to pure badass progressive metal, then Neil Recurring is definitely the one to go with. I think, this is a great showcase for Porcupine Tree, which shows them at the top of their game. And you've got Robert Fripp on here as well. Doesn't get any better than that. And although there's only 4 tracks, all 4 tracks are just really memorable, in my opinion. The title track, Cheating the Polygraph, What Happens Now, it's great music, all great, and it's just classic Porcupine Tree at their very best. Absolutely enjoyed this one. Tremendous EP, and can't go wrong really. There's plenty of music to get your teeth into, but if you really want to hear Porcupine Tree at their peak, then Neil Recurring is definitely the one I would go with. This is Porcupine Tree at their best. So there you have it. Porcupine Tree, Neil Recurring, for me, the best EP they've ever put out, in my opinion. Excellent stuff. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite Porcupine Tree EP and compilation? Is it Metonia, Voyage 34, Recordings, Stars Die, The Derillium Years 1991 to 1997, or Neil Recurring? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourites. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Progressive Rock and Metal album review series, where I will be back for part 3 of this 3-part Porcupine Tree special, where I am going to be discussing all of Porcupine Tree's official live albums. So that's going to be a lot of fun, as I feel that's an environment Porcupine Tree really come into their own. So make sure you don't miss that. So until next time, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.